The coffee in front of me had gone cold. I stared through the cafe window as people hurried along the sunlit sidewalk outside, laughing, talking, living their lives, while I sat alone at a corner table wondering why I had let myself believe this would be different. 35 minutes. That was how long I had been waiting. 35 minutes of checking my phone, glancing toward the door, and pretending not to notice the sympathetic looks from the waitress who had already asked twice if I wanted another drink. The blind date had been arranged by my coworker, who insisted that this woman was kind, intelligent, and worth meeting. "You two have both been through enough," she had told me. Maybe that was true. Maybe we had. But as the minutes dragged by, it felt like I had once again become the guy people forgot about. The guy who always ended up sitting alone. The guy who had spent years rebuilding a life that fell apart overnight. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that life can surprise us when we least expect it, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Lifeline Hub for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. I sighed and looked down at my watch. 40 minutes. That was enough. I reached for my wallet, ready to pay and leave. Then the cafe door opened. At first, I barely looked up. But something made me pause. A woman stood in the doorway, sunlight framing her silhouette. She looked slightly out of breath, as if she had been rushing. And beside her stood a little girl no older than 7, holding tightly to her hand. The woman scanned the room. Her eyes found mine. Relief immediately spread across her face. And in that moment, everything changed. Her name was Marisol. The little girl beside her was Ava. As they walked toward my table, I noticed the exhaustion hidden beneath Marisol's warm smile. She wasn't late because she didn't care. She was late because life had happened. The kind of life that doesn't care about schedules or first impressions. She apologized several times before even sitting down. Traffic had been terrible. Then Ava's babysitter canceled unexpectedly. Then Ava had a minor panic attack because she didn't want her mother meeting a stranger. By the time they finally arrived, the day had already turned into a disaster. But despite everything, Marisol had still come. That simple fact struck me harder than I expected. Because showing up matters. Especially when life gives you every reason not to. Ava sat quietly with a coloring book while Marisol and I talked. At first, the conversation felt cautious. Two strangers carefully stepping around old wounds. But little by little, the walls began to lower. I learned that Marisol was a pediatric nurse. I learned that she had raised Ava alone for nearly 6 years. I learned that Ava's father had walked away before she was even born. There was no dramatic explanation. No tragic accident. No heartbreaking misunderstanding. He simply left. Marisol had spent years carrying responsibilities that should have belonged to 2 people. And yet there wasn't bitterness in her voice. Only strength. The kind of strength people earn one difficult day at a time. Eventually she asked about me. And that was harder. Because my story wasn't one I enjoyed telling. 3 years earlier, my fiancé had ended our relationship 2 months before our wedding. We had been together for nearly 7 years. 7 years of plans. 7 years of dreams. 7 years of believing we were building a future together. Then one conversation destroyed all of it. She fell in love with someone else. Just like that. No dramatic fight. No warning signs I recognized. One day we were planning centerpieces and honeymoon destinations. The next day she was gone. The months that followed felt like surviving a shipwreck. Friends got married. Coworkers started families. Life moved forward for everyone except me. At least that's how it felt. Marisol listened carefully. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer clichés. She simply listened. And somehow that meant more than any advice ever could. As the afternoon sunlight poured through the cafe windows, something unexpected happened. I stopped feeling nervous. I stopped worrying about whether she liked me. I stopped trying to impress anyone. For the first time in years, I was simply being myself. When Ava finished coloring, she proudly showed us her drawing. It was a picture of 3 people standing beneath a giant yellow sun. One of them looked suspiciously like me. The little girl blushed when I noticed. Marisol laughed. And the sound of her laughter filled the room with warmth. The date lasted nearly 4 hours. Neither of us realized how much time had passed. When we finally stood to leave, I found myself hoping it wouldn't be the last time I saw them. Fortunately, it wasn't. Over the next few months, we slowly became part of each other's lives. There were no grand romantic gestures. No movie-style moments. Just ordinary days. Coffee runs. Walks in the park. Weekend lunches. School events. Conversations that stretched long into the evening. The more time I spent around Ava, the more attached I became. She was bright, funny, stubborn, and endlessly curious. She asked questions about everything. Sometimes impossible questions. Sometimes hilarious ones. And somehow she always made me laugh. Yet despite how naturally everything seemed to fit together, fear remained. For both of us. Marisol feared disappointment. She feared trusting someone who might eventually leave. I feared becoming attached to a family that wasn't really mine. Because losing them would hurt more than being alone ever had. Neither of us spoke those fears aloud. But they lingered beneath the surface. Months passed. Then one afternoon changed everything. Ava's school hosted a family field day. Parents were invited to participate in games and activities. Marisol had to work an emergency shift at the hospital. She was devastated. Ava tried to act brave. But I could see how disappointed she was. Without thinking much about it, I offered to go in Marisol's place. The silence that followed felt enormous. Ava looked at me with wide eyes. Marisol looked equally surprised. Then tears quietly appeared in her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Just small ones. The kind that appear when someone unexpectedly helps carry a burden you've carried alone for years. That Saturday morning, Ava and I attended the event together. We ran races. Built ridiculous cardboard towers. Lost spectacularly at tug-of-war. And laughed until our stomachs hurt. At one point, another parent assumed I was Ava's father. The words caught me off guard. For a moment, neither of us corrected them. And strangely, it didn't feel wrong. Later that evening, after Ava had fallen asleep, Marisol thanked me. She told me something she had never admitted before. She said that ever since becoming a mother, she had felt invisible. People saw responsibilities. People saw struggles. People saw a single mom trying to survive. But they rarely saw her. The woman beneath all of it. The person who still dreamed. Who still hoped. Who still wanted companionship. Hearing that broke my heart. Because I understood exactly what she meant. After my engagement ended, people had treated me like a cautionary tale. The guy whose future collapsed. The guy who got left behind. They stopped seeing who I was becoming. They only remembered who I used to be. For a long time, both of us had been trapped inside stories written by our pain. But together, we were beginning to write a different one. One built on trust instead of fear. Hope instead of regret. And slowly, day by day, that hope started feeling real. The greatest challenge arrived nearly a year after our first meeting. Ava became seriously ill. What initially appeared to be a routine infection developed into something much more concerning. The following weeks were filled with hospital visits, sleepless nights, and uncertainty. Marisol barely left Ava's side. Neither did I. We took turns resting in uncomfortable waiting room chairs. We ate vending machine meals. We tried to stay optimistic even when fear threatened to overwhelm us. There is something about watching a child suffer that changes you. It strips away everything unimportant. Every petty concern. Every unnecessary worry. All that remains is love. Pure and simple. Love becomes the only thing that matters. One night, around 3 in the morning, I found Marisol crying quietly in a hospital hallway. Not because she was weak. Because she had been strong for too long. And strength eventually needs somewhere to rest. I sat beside her. We didn't say much. Words weren't necessary. Sometimes presence is the greatest gift we can offer another person. And that night, presence was enough. Thankfully, Ava recovered. Slowly but steadily. The day doctors finally cleared her to return home felt like sunlight after a long storm. We celebrated with pizza, cartoons, and far too much ice cream. None of us cared. We were simply grateful. Grateful for health. Grateful for time. Grateful for each other. And perhaps for the first time, I realized something important. I wasn't building a relationship anymore. I was building a family. Months later, on a bright spring afternoon, I took Marisol and Ava back to the same cafe where everything began. The same corner table was available. The same sunlight streamed through the windows. The same familiar warmth filled the room. But we weren't the same people. Not even close. We had survived fears. Shared burdens. Weathered storms. And somehow emerged stronger. Together. Before the ending of this story, I want to ask something special. If you've ever experienced a second chance, found love when you least expected it, or met someone who changed your life simply by showing up, please leave a comment below and share your story with our community. What happened next remains one of the most beautiful moments of my life. Because sometimes the person you think stood you up is actually fighting a battle you know nothing about. And sometimes the delayed arrival you nearly walk away from becomes the greatest blessing you'll ever receive. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Hub. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need hope today.